Welcome to the Pigskin Party Podcast, the only podcast that combines real NFL analysis with a splash of pop culture and a dash of the random. Let's get this Pigskin Party started with your hosts, Brian McFadden and Will Southard.
Welcome to the PPP. My name is Brian. Please make sure to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you're listening or watching this. And, just like every week, tell a friend because that is how we grow this Pigskin Party. Joining me, as always, to break everything down, my co-host who loves to wear sleeveless shirts, and today is no different, Will Southard. How you doing, dude?
It's my uniform, buddy. I live in Florida. I need this. I have sandals on, too, and shorts, but you can't see those.
Do they just hand those out when you get off the airplane? Are you in the moving truck, and they're like, welcome to Florida. Here's your expected wardrobe?
They actually catch you when you come out of the womb. They just catch you in a sleeveless shirt already. And throw little sandals on you. Man, I'm feeling good. I'm feeling crypto rich, man. We talked about crypto on here, and it's been a good time for me. I've been invested in the ether. I'm feeling good, feeling a little full going in. So it's time to talk some football.
Yeah, you're trying to convince me to get on the crypto train, and maybe I should, and maybe I'm missing the boat. But you seem to be doing pretty well financially, so maybe I'm the idiot here. Let's go ahead and get started. This is the first week. Like, the draft happened last week, obviously, and we had the draft recap. But this is the first week. It's like, It's just another off week, but that doesn't mean we don't have a ton of stuff to talk about with the NFL. So let's go ahead and bring in, we got two guests this week. Our first guest is Rich Maletto, who is the co-host of the ATB Fantasy Show, who happens to be both a Browns and a Steelers fan.
Yeah, it's pretty messed up, I know. I catch a lot of flack for that.
Well, inquiring minds want to know, like how does that happen? How do those two actually exist?
So I was born outside of Cleveland or in Cleveland in a suburb or, whatever. And my dad's from Pennsylvania. So from the time I was 6 weeks old, I was in Steeler outfits. We watched Penn State football. I was in Steeler outfits. That's the way it was. Now, mind you, this is Cleveland in the 80s. And there were some nice condos at the entrance of our development, our neighborhood, and there was Browns players that lived there. Webster Slaughter, Reggie Langhorne, Gerald McNeil, to name a few of them. Webster Slaughter's license plate, by the way, used to say Webstar, in case you're curious.
Oh, nice.
With gold-plated door handles. So anyhow.
Naturally.
Right. So, and we're all big into football, and it was pretty tough not cheering for the Browns there in Cleveland. I mean, there was a lot of hype. The dog pound had just got it started then. And at 6 years old, I'm telling my parents, I'm going to play football for both of them. And they don't have the heart to tell their kid he can't. They're like, well, what happens when they play each other? Well, I play for the home team, duh. Like, what else would you do, So I kept stats on both of them. In the 5th grade, I did a report on Terry Bradshaw in Cleveland there,
Ooh.
So, I mean, yeah. Like I said, I was
playing with fire.
He was still 75 years old when you were in 5th grade.
He was
he's old as hell.
Actually, back then, I'm a little older than you think, but back then he still had the blonde hair, and I don't even know if he had gotten much into TV yet. It would have been like 88, 89 maybe.
Okay.
All right, so that explains it a little bit. There's at least a logical reason behind it. Let's go ahead and bring in our second guest, Tom Doherty, who is the co-host of the Friday Night Beers podcast and just a Steelers fan. No half of him that cheers for Cleveland. Tom, how you doing?
I'm doing great, and Rich, I appreciate that explanation because I got to say I was pretty confused when I first heard it, but that makes a lot of sense. Coincidentally, I'm a Midwest guy myself. I'm here in Chicago. And I don't root for the Bears, which I have to say has been a great blessing in my life. But I still, I support my Bear fan friends. I go to Bears games, but I'm diehard black and gold. That's for sure.
Stock might be up on the Bears now.
I can at least attest I have been through Cleveland heartbreak. I watched the drive live with the bones around my neck. I'm still adamant the field goal kick was good from the year before. And I was at the game with the Michael Jordan, the shot. So I've been through true Cleveland heartache. So, I mean, I can't deny it.
Yeah.
I was at our factory this company I work for is in Cleveland. I was at Baker Mayfield's first game when Tyrod got hurt. And I have not been to that many Browns games, but I just so happened to be at that one, and that was pretty awesome.
Back when Tyrod Taylor got a normal injury and was replaced by a rookie quarterback, as opposed to getting his lung punctured and replaced by a rookie quarterback.
Like Cleveland is a whatever city, but like Browns football games are pretty fun. There's a weird thing about Browns football games that I don't understand. No matter how the Browns are doing, everyone leaves at halftime. Like you look at the stadium and just crowds just pouring out, and you're like, "What's going on?" It's like our ritual, like leaving at halftime thing, and I'm like, "Okay."
Yeah, I mean, I guess if for like a quarter century you're so used to them losing and not make the playoffs, I wonder if that's going to change next year now that they've finally broken that streak. So there is a through line with our. Go ahead.
Well, I would say I wonder if it's traffic, because as a kid going to Browns games, I used to hate. We used to go to Browns Steelers games, and we always left with a few minutes to go in the fourth quarter, no matter if it was a good game, it was a bad game, and it was adamant to get to the parking garage, to get to the vehicle, and start heading out. And I don't know, I'd have to ask my dad how bad it was. I don't know if it was one of those things where, because everybody's either at the game, around the game, at the stadium, that it's like a mass exodus of a Midwest smaller city and they just can't handle the highways. I don't know. But I remember as a kid griping about, do we really have to leave early?
My dad used to do that. He used to leave early. But games I've gone to on my own, starting in college, I refuse to leave a game early. I don't care if it's a blowout. I'm there. I spent it was free in college.
College football for sure.
Yeah. Well, pros too.
College football's a whole
If I'm spending money, if I'm going to a game, I'm going to experience the whole thing. So, as I started to say, we do have a through line. Go ahead, Rich. One more comment, then we'll
No. Go ahead. No, go ahead. Your through line. I'm all ears.
Okay, through line. We have a through line for both of our guests, and that is that at least in some capacity, they both are Steelers fans. So we are going to continue our team deep dive series this week, and we are going to be diving deep on the Pittsburgh Steelers. We will be doing it in this main NFL episode. Last week, we actually did it during the flavor of the week. But first, as always, because the NFL never stops turning, there is some news to discuss. And the first is something we mentioned as a possibility.
The Lord has blessed the NFL.
Oh, God.
The Lord has come down and bestowed upon the NFL his one chosen, begotten tight end.
You know, I don't even want to say this part of the news. I'll just let you do it. I don't even want the words to come out of my mouth. So, Will,
what are you talking about?
Why don't you talk about the first news item on our show notes?
So like I just said,
minus the theology part of it, just the facts.
Oh, okay. Just the facts, ma'am. So the Jaguars are indeed going to go forward with the Tebow experiment. 33 years old, hasn't been in the league in what, eight years now, something like that.
Something like 3,000 games, or somebody, yeah.
That's a fair amount of games, but they're signing him. I mean, who knows if he makes the team? We'll see, but maybe. Tim Tebow.
But you mentioned last week that Jaguars tight end depth chart. There's a very good shot. I mean, if any team.
Hey, dude, I hope he does well, man. Tim Tebow so you can love him or you can hate him. Keep in mind my background and my pedigree. Everyone knows how I feel about him. But the reality is he didn't really deserve the fanfare that he got going everywhere. And that really wasn't his fault. You know what I mean? Like, the fact that, like, no one could ever, like, find dirt on him, people just wanted to see him, you know, fail. So,
but there was also another half of him that people were obsessed with him, right?
When you're on the Patriots and, like, people are talking to, like, Tom Brady about Tim Tebow, the fourth string quarterback, like, there's a problem. So, yeah, I mean, he was a distraction wherever he went in the NFL, and he is one now.
Already.
We're talking about a tight end who hasn't even he's not even signed. And we're already talking about him.
Tight end. Don't forget, he hasn't even played tight end, okay?
Can he catch? Who knows?
I will say this does connect to the Steelers in a perverse way, because he's the only potential tight end who started in a playoff game against the Steelers and defeated them. So I guess that could just keep going. But, yeah, I would say I was more on the Tebow hater side, that 2011 run. I couldn't believe it, and then, of course, we were on the bad end of that stick.
Rich, you put something on Twitter, like something like, "Hey, you guys can have Tebow. Like, good luck," or something like that.
Oh yeah, I said y'all can have Tebow. I'll pass, because a couple of fantasy leagues I'm in, guys already grabbed him. And I'm thinking,
Oh, seriously?
yeah, I know,
How?
man.
He's not even on a roster.
Right.
Well, but see, the report came out that he signed a 1-year contract. Okay, everyone forgets that we got the June 1st cuts, we got the 53-man roster cuts, we got preseason, we got all this other nonsense too, right? But look, I like Tebow as a human. All right, I like him as a person. I think he catches too much flack for the hate that he gets. My beef with him, he was never going to be a good NFL quarterback. He does not have the mental capabilities to process the field like an NFL. And I have good grounds on this, Willie, that even in high school, the offenses were dumbed down for him. They made him very simplified.
I will say this. If you've ever heard him speak, he is pretty stupid.
He's very simple. He's very simple. My buddy says it best. He's very simple, okay?
He is.
He's very
He's a
simple.
simple man.
And as that, he needed to make that change to fullback, tight end, whatever he wanted to do. What did you say, Willie, 8 years ago?
Yeah. Yeah, something like that.
That's crazy. So, I mean, Rich, you bring up a good point. It's getting a lot of media attention. It would have had even more pre-draft if the Rodgers news hadn't come out right after. But this is May. We're at 90. We've got camp bodies they're going to get. You know, Urban owes him a favor. Do we actually think that this is going to be a real thing? He's never played tight end. He's 33 years old. He hasn't been in the NFL in almost a decade. Even as the Jaguars tight end depth chart being as it is this a realistic thing, or is this going to be like a flash in the pan and then he doesn't even make the 53-man?
Well, let me ask you guys, is this not an Urban Meyer? I mean, this screams Urban Meyer all over it, does it not? I mean,
oh, yeah.
Whether it works out or not, I can see him making the team because, well, you know, we're going to run some jet sweeps with the tight end and maybe throw some off of it and keep deep. I mean, I'm even somewhat of an Urban Meyer fan of sorts, but this just screams Urban Meyer and, okay, this ain't college, but whatever.
Is there some nostalgia there? I mean, you won two national championships with Tebow. Oh, maybe he can rekindle some of that. Or maybe they're just buds. Maybe they're friends. I think Lindsay on the show last week said they live near each other, like they're neighbors.
Yeah, I mean, it could also be the Florida connection. Jacksonville's in Florida. There's probably a lot of Gator fans who live nearby. It could purely just be a marketing, stunt for a team that probably is arguably the least passionate fans in football, this side of London. But, yeah, I mean, I'm with you guys. Like, we're a long way away from him suiting up week 1 for the Jaguars. I mean, it's May, so I'm skeptical.
I don't think I'm going out on a limb by saying this will not, unfortunately, be the last time we talk about Tim Tebow in this NFL offseason. But let's move on.
Tebow.
There are more things to get to. The Indianapolis Colts made a signing, or at least it's announced that they are expected to make a signing, and they signed former...
Great signing.
Fantastic signing. Signed former... You keep interrupting my news. You want to just...
I just thought about that, and I just felt bad.
Oh, okay.
I'm excited because I didn't hear this. I was busy all day. Let's hear it.
Oh, good.
Go
See,
ahead,
we're breaking news to Rich right now, Will, so shush. The Indianapolis Colts, it's reported, will be signing former Chiefs offensive tackle Eric Fisher. So he was cut by the Chiefs. He had an Achilles tear late in the season. Actually, Achilles. Might have even been in the playoffs. So he's coming off that surgery. He's not even going to be ready by the start of the season. But they had Anthony Costanzo retire. They did not address left tackle in a substantial way in the draft. Like Will said, great signing. I mean, I don't really have any fault with this. Even if it's a 1-year deal, even if he's not ready till October, you're going to have him most of the season. And a league average left tackle Eric Fisher, I think is going to be better than developing some later round rookie.
Oh, yeah. 100%.
100% agree.
Big fan. I mean, Wentz needs that really bad.
Yeah.
Coupled with... Go ahead. Sorry.
Well, they had a great O-line last year, so they can't afford to let that go the wayside and bring in Wentz and expect to do well. I mean, who hasn't knocked Wentz and at least some of them blame the offensive line if you're not putting it on Wentz himself, right?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen that Wentz has a problem with holding the ball too long, taking sacks, trying to make the big play, hero ball, and that's a problem that's exacerbated if you have a bad line. And in Philadelphia, they had a bad line. He was running for his life, threw picks, a lot of fumbles. Indianapolis, their offensive line is their strength. They had Costanzo retire. I like the plug-and-play option here as opposed to drafting a rookie unless it's a really high-end rookie. So, I mean, any other thoughts? This is a pretty straightforward news item, check off the list. Another great move by GM Chris Ballard.
Quentin Nelson is probably my favorite NFL lineman of all time, by the way. So anytime you can make him look better by complimenting the other cast of characters, it's a plus for me. Is there not a more likable, better offensive lineman in the NFL than Quentin Nelson? Have you seen that video of him screaming, like as he blocks people? Have you seen that?
No.
I haven't seen it, but he used to be teammates with Andrew Luck, who would compliment guys after getting sacked. So that must have been quite a cheery combo in the Colts huddle.
There's a video of Quentin Nelson. I got to find it, but like every time he blocks somebody, he's like, "Ah!" Like he goes crazy. it's really awesome.
Well,
Did
that's
Nelson
how
really
offensive
play
linemen
with?
should be.
Didn't Nelson? Wasn't he drafted the year that Luck retired?
I think he was there for his rookie season was with Luck, and that was last season. I believe.
Yeah, I thought it was 2018 because Nelson's coming up on a long-term extension soon.
Right.
So I think the timing somewhat overlaps.
Because he came out with Barkley, right? Because that was the same class as Barkley.
Yeah.
Saquon.
All right, so let's keep it moving. There is an interesting thing I want to discuss, and that is that Broncos right tackle Ju'Wuan James, who is a former Dolphin, signed a huge free agent deal a couple years ago. Suffered another Achilles. Suffered a torn Achilles while working out away from the team facility. Now, there's a couple points here. Number one, so James sat out last year, and he was injured the year before. So I believe he's played like a total of 60 snaps after signing that huge contract. But here's where it gets interesting. So since it was an independent workout, it was away from the team facility, it's actually deemed a non-football injury, and technically Denver is not obligated to pay his base salary of nearly $10 million this year.
I mean, they should though.
Well, let's hear it.
You think they will?
Well, here, like I said, the reason I started with his tenure. So this is a player they spent a lot of money on, who they basically haven't got to see any of because of the opt-out and the injury. And if this is their chance to cut bait, and like, does George Payton and John Elway, do they actually care? Or are they just like, no, screw it, we're done with this guy?
Here's the thing. I feel like this is one of those dangerous precedents, right? Because if you start forcing teams to play for independent workout injuries, couldn't I argue I was working out rock climbing? I was working out surfing.
Well, I think from a legal perspective, absolutely. You have to take – I don't blame the NFL at all for taking a firm stand. But, like, there's the humanitarian side of the – like, look what the Steelers did for what's his name? The ball guy.
Ryan Shazier.
That's it. They paid him a lot. You know, and they weren't obligated to just for being a part of the organization. And obviously – guy just coming in is not like to a franchise what Ryan is to the Steelers, but similar kind of thing, right? Like they can do whatever they want. It's just
but Shazier gave them some good years too. I mean, he was a solid. Ju'Wuan James has played like 60 snaps. You're talking about less than a game.
And he got hurt on the game and he got hurt during a game. I mean, I think that's where the NFL really sees a big difference here. Is if Shazier had done that playing pickup basketball, do the Steelers still do that? Maybe, probably. I mean, they've been a good organization. I'm not going to sit here and say they wouldn't. But I think there is a difference when you see a guy get hurt like that in a game on TV or at home or at the stadium versus, like I said, I think you get into a real dangerous area. I mean, can you verify what he was doing when he worked out? I mean, do we 100% know?
Probably landing on his ankle, if I had to guess.
Landing on his
Achilles. Well, but I mean, remember,
on his
I mean, what if who was the Broncos guy that tripped over his dog and broke his whatever? Was that Greasy?
I don't remember reading that.
Oh, that must have been a while ago.
Tripped over his dog?
Oh, yeah, this is old. Like, he had tripped over his dog and, like, sprained an ankle, sprained a wrist. Oh, I swear it was Greasy. I don't think it was
Oh, man, now you're bringing back some names.
Jake the Snake, yeah.
Jake the Snake.
Hey, you guys, you want to talk about? I know this is kind of off topic. Random Panthers quarterback Jake Delhomme. Remember that?
Oh yeah,
quarterback.
That's
Jake
right.
Delhomme.
Yeah, buddy, that's going back. All right. Now
that's it. There was no
everything.
story. You just wanted to drop Jake Delhomme's
I just wanted to drop his name because Nobody remembers Jake Malone, but he was like a staple.
That is
Hey,
the
I
time
lived in
when
Carolina. I won't forget him.
Yeah.
Yeah, the only thing I have to add to this news story is it is kind of reminiscent of conversations a lot of companies are having about their employees being at work and not being at work. We're just seeing it kind of unfold in a very public and unique fashion. But I do think that a lot of coaches and teams are going to start to try to win back some territory, if you will, where last year they basically had to do everything virtually, and most veterans want less practice in OTAs, and the coaches obviously they want as much as they can get. So I'm sure this is not the last time we're going to be hearing about situations like this.
Wasn't that Tom Brady telling everybody not to go to OTAs now? Or something?
Right, and that was the part I wanted to bring up next. So a lot of players started voicing on social media their issue, including Patrick Mahomes, their issue with the fact that the Broncos, they didn't say they wouldn't pay him, but there was all these news reports that they don't have to pay him. And the second part of this is, so the NFLPA, the National Football League Players Association, has been urging players to stay away from in-person workouts in the offseason. And a little bit of a boycott. It's a push to get them to modify the off-season workout. So everybody was virtual last year. A lot of the players really liked that. They didn't want to go back to these super heavy, intense off-season workouts. And Tom Brady got on the NFLPA call on Friday and was very, very passionate and telling all the players on the call, like, don't go, don't work out. You negotiate with your teams and fight for this particular issue. And so these kind of do tie in. Do we think... Oh, and by the way, there's been, 4 rookie mini camps, and everybody came to them. So at least the rookies did not listen to Old Man Brady. But what do you guys make of this?
Yeah, I mean, this is a storyline we hear every year in the NFL. You know, there's established veterans. They don't want to practice. They don't want to show up in the offseason, and a lot of them, frankly, don't need to. I mean, what does a guy like Tom Brady need to go to OTAs for? I don't even like Brady, and I'm with him on that sense. But at the same time,
let's repeat that. You do not like who?
Tom Brady.
Awesome.
Well,
Thank you.
Steelers
Tom,
fan, so
Tom, you just bought yourself another return on this podcast.
Yeah, well, that shouldn't surprise anybody at being a Steelers fan. But I guess to close the point, like, on the flip side, you know, younger guys or people who are fighting to be in the league, they really don't have a say. Like, they are kind of at the mercy of the organizations they work for, and frankly, they need a lot of in-person time. So, you know, I almost think they need to meet somewhere in the middle, and I don't know how they do that. But, you know, it's not necessarily the first time we're hearing this narrative in public.
I mean, if you're a rookie, you need to go there as early as you can and get as much as you can in that first year. And you should want to, dude. Like, unless you're one of these like first, second round picks that you know is gonna, you know, you're a lock. I mean, you owe it to the team and organization. Yeah, like you need to be there. Like, I get it if you're a vet, maybe like year 2 onward, maybe not. But that first year, I think you it's just an obligation thing.
Wasn't it Mike Holmgren and Brett Favre where there was the whole discussion about where he was like, no, he doesn't need to be here, but yeah, these other guys do because there's still a lot, you know. Brett's done and seen it. I know what I'm going to get when he gets back here. I mean,
I think I remember that.
And that's part of the issue here is, and with veterans, and I get that. So these are players. Tom Brady, he doesn't need to attend off-season workouts. The guy's won 1 million Super Bowls at this point. Yeah. But here's these players, these rookies, or these fringe roster players. Tim Tebow certainly needs to go to these workouts if he has any hope of making the Jaguars roster.
Whether it's Trey Lance, whether it's Najee Harris, it doesn't really matter. These guys need to pick up. Look, Jimmy Garoppolo is light years ahead of Trey Lance in knowing that offense. Your quarterback needs to know the offense. So I'm with Willie on this. If I want to succeed in my career, I may have to do things that somebody else may not be willing to do. Right?
But the thing with that is Tom is trying to galvanize the entire player base, but you've got all these players that are not incentivized. It is not in their best interest to work out away from the facility. They need to do everything they can just to try to make a roster. And so a little tone deaf by your boy Tommy there, Will?
I mean, you can't hear from his $6 million yacht.
The cynic in me could also make the case that it's better for Brady to convince players not to go so that they have to work out with the TB12 program and he can make some money off that. But, I'm not going to say that.
No, I'm convinced that you're right. Tom, you are onto something. I think that's exactly what's happening here.
Yeah, I mean, all these people are building their own, fitness brands, so I'm sure that they think whatever their sauce is better.
See, you think TB12 is about his jersey number. It's not. It's about his wiener length.
That may be fine, but think about this. Tom was also the guy that was one of the first when he went to Tampa to get some off-season individual work and everything else. So why is the guy who had no problem getting together with receivers and finding workarounds for COVID telling everybody else, don't go practice? Is that not ironic in some way?
Rich, I think it's amazing that you completely glossed over Will's comment about Tom Brady's wiener. So you just went right back into the analysis, and I love that. And I'm also surprised, Will, this is the first time you've ever made an actual reference to that specific member of Tom Brady. So let's move on, because we've done enough talking about Brady for one particular podcast. He'll come up again. He always does. So one more bit of news. So it's not a huge bit of news, but there is one aspect I wanted to bring up, and that was that the Detroit Lions released running back Kerryon Johnson. He was immediately claimed off.
They told him to carry on.
No, see, they can't all be winners. Well, that was
that was pretty funny.
Bad one,
because that's his name.
Bad joke.
No,
but
that was a good joke.
He was claimed by the Eagles right away, which makes sense. He's still young. He was drafted 3 years ago, but it's around this hype and how it shifts so quickly, especially around running backs, I feel like. But Kerryon Johnson, if you guys remember, was like the big fantasy rookie sleeper when he came out 3 years ago. And he was going to be – I had him.
Such a deep sleeper, he never popped out.
Yeah, I guess so. He actually had some –
he really wasn't that
showed
deep.
Promise. No, that's true. I think it was like ADP of like the third round. But the thing is,
he was a decent – to your point, Brian, he was a tart. We're talking 2 to 3 years. He was on a rookie contract still. Yeah. And you're right. He was a darling for everybody, man.
And he wasn't he was a second or third round pick, so it's not like he was on a heavy first round contract. But wow, the fact that he's done already, it just...
I mean, hasn't he had a couple of, I know he enjoys playing video games, but hasn't he had a couple of things where, he hasn't been that in shape? I seem to remember, maybe I'm crossing my wires, but I seem to remember something about that. He wasn't, as trim as they thought he would be.
Possibly. I don't remember seeing that. But,
second round, Brian.
Second round? Yep.
That's pretty high draft capital for a running back that you all of a sudden cut on a rookie contract. To me, that speaks volumes of their opinion of Kerryon Johnson.
Correct.
I was going to say, have the Lions had a good running back consistently since the Clinton administration? Because I don't think so. I was doing some research on first-round running backs, and I don't think Jamin Best was in the first round, but his name popped up. I haven't thought about him in a long time, and he's just one of many flamed-out Lions running back options. Mikhail Shore also comes to mind.
Amir Abdullah.
Amir Abdullah. That's who I was thinking, from Nebraska. He had a lot of hype.
Yeah. And I think they even had LeGarrette Blount for a hot second, if I'm not mistaken. But
who did?
I think you're right.
Steelers had him too. So
I would say who did? I would say he.
But hey,
and his claim to fame punching a fan in the face.
Well, he also
I remember that.
won a Super Bowl. I mean, he's been able to gloss over that, but. They we'll see year 2 DeAndre Swift. That's the kind
great
of
one.
Yeah, let's see if maybe that's what allows them to get rid of a back like Kerryon Johnson, who they invested a second round pick in only 3 years ago.
DeAndre Swift has already been more than Kerryon ever was.
Yeah, it's true.
True story.
But like Tom said, this needs to be consistent. We'll see if he can do it into year 2. So we've gone through the news. There's always news in this league. We did our team deep dive last week in the flavor of the week. We have brought it back to the main NFL episode. So what we've always done in the past is we've had a single fan, a single guest to talk about the Steelers. But since you both have some sort of Steelers allegiance, I'm still a little confused at the Browns-Steelers thing, but some sort of, fine. We'll get both of your opinions on this. So I do want to hear from both of you as we go into the deep dive. So first thoughts, and we'll start with Tom. What's your general thoughts on the 2020 season, high level?
Wow, recapping this was like, reading, like Homer's Iliad or the Odyssey. I mean, so much happened in one season. It was a very paradoxical time to be a Steeler fan. You know, obviously everybody knows they started 11-0. It was a talking point pretty much every single week. You know, not every win was great, but, you know, they just kept winning and the conversation kept going. You know, I was positioning them in the AFC playoff bracket all year long, but, you know, we all know what happened next. They lost 4 of their last 5 regular season games to some pretty bad football teams, including the Ryan Finley-led Cincinnati Bengals on Monday night that I wish I could forget. There was a little bit of a tease against Indianapolis that second to last week when they had the furious comeback, and then they rested their starters against the Browns in Week 17. And then that week 1 wild card playoff matchup that will haunt me probably for the rest of my life. Rich, I'm sure you had a really conflicted feelings now that I know your allegiances, but, you know, I'm not sure I've ever seen a worse quarter of football, period, than that first quarter. It was
atrocious,
hugely embarrassing, especially given the Browns. I mean, we've owned the Browns. They've been our punching bag ever since I've been alive, basically.
Juju wasn't worried.
Juju was not. No, he doused, you know, gasoline onto that fire.
I would say Juju needs to pump the brakes on that a little bit. I love Juju, but damn.
Right. Yeah, well, he also played a role in their demise with, you know, the drop epidemic in the receiving corps and the TikTok dances that he was scolded about. But, you know, to be very honest, like, they just didn't take the Browns seriously, and they got burned really bad. So it was a pretty bitter way to end what started off as a pretty great year. And, you know, I know we're going to talk a lot about Roethlisberger in a minute, but, you know, I've just never had so many, like, high highs and deflating lows in one football season. We even played a game on a Wednesday afternoon, so I don't know what else we could have done that didn't involve us winning the Super Bowl.
Rich, before we get into Roethlisberger, who did you cheer for in that wild card game between the Browns and the Steelers? How does that work?
So I was adamant that the Steelers were going to thump them in that playoff game. They rested their starters. I was actually surprised Mason Rudolph looked like a adequate quarterback for the first time I'd ever seen him play. I mean, nothing to write home about, but I was like, oh, well, you kind of look like an NFL
I think Big Ben set the bar pretty low, so it made
but I mean, when you've seen Mason play before, it's hard to watch. I mean, it is really difficult to watch and feel like this is who you want to trust with your organization. I mean, he's really bad. So I put a bunch of money on the Steelers to win because the odds weren't as spread as I thought they should have been. So I was laughing at the end of the first quarter because that is not what I expected. And at that point in time, I guess I was just kind of ready for the ride the wave. I mean, I had hopes for the Steelers going to the Super Bowl, but after that first quarter, they were out the window. I mean, they had already been on a downward slide. The problem I had watching the season, I didn't think they were ever deserving of being 11-0. Their offense was very stagnant.
Did all of America.
Well, they're up.
On this podcast, I predicted their first loss. I predicted that Washington would beat them, and that was back when Washington had like 4 or 5 wins. But I just felt like Pittsburgh was overachieving.
I agree with you. I put a bet on Washington that game. I felt like the writing was on the wall. That offense became so predictable on what they were trying to do and what they couldn't do. It was I don't know. I felt like if I was scheming against the Steelers, my job was made easy.
Yeah, I mean, I was shocked looking back today that the Steelers ended up finishing with the 15th best passing offense, but first in passing attempts. So I mean, it was pretty clear what they were doing, and everybody just, you know, dared them to run the ball, and they couldn't even do it. So, you know, when you're predictable and your quarterback's not playing well, that's a bad recipe, and it put a lot of pressure on them, especially when you know, spot your opponent 14 points in about 1 minute. So, you know, it was basically a complete recipe for disaster in that playoff game.
And when you're so one-dimensional, but your quarterback, like you said, not only was Big Ben playing bad, his passes didn't look right, to the point where they basically had him throwing no longer than like 4 to 5 yards at once. So his average depth of target for much of the end run of the season was like 5.5 yards, which is crazy. So then you just condense the defense, press the line. You don't have to worry about the deep ball, and Pittsburgh they were easy to slow down. So let's transition to talking about Ben now, Tom. Are you happy that he's back? Would you wish he would have retired? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I was certainly getting a retirement vibe after that game, but, within a few days, I had already kind of like talked myself into he's coming back. And to me, it's kind of like a marriage of convenience. I think that, in an ideal world, the Steelers could have moved on from him and maybe just he retired and gone somewhere else, but he basically forced both of their hands by saying, I want to come back and play. And on top of that, the alternatives for them were really not that much better. I mean, the free agent quarterback market sucks, and we weren't going to – I'd rather have Roethlisberger than Teddy Bridgewater at this point. He did agree to take a small pay cut, which helped them a little bit. Their cap hit was originally going to be an astounding $41 million. They got him down to 14, so that definitely helped. But, like any good, compromise in a dissolving marriage, there were changes that had to be made. They fired the O coordinator, Randy Fichtner, who was kind of buddy-buddy with him. So they're going to have a new play caller. And, they basically made him take this, pretty big pay cut, which I thought was the bare minimum. But, their draft position wasn't great. They weren't going to get one of these 5 guys. Mid-round draft pick quarterbacks are traditionally, wasted picks outside of, the occasional Russell Wilson. So, I mean, it's not the most ideal, but it could be a lot worse. And to be fair to Roethlisberger, before his arm turned into a noodle, he actually did get off to a good start. So I think if we fix the offense, we're not throwing 55 times a game, maybe there could be some value from that. But Rich, I don't know how you feel about it.
I'm concerned, man. This is the first time that I'm not real excited with what the front office did. I always feel like they've been really savvy. I think the Steelers were in a pickle. I think Ben was in a pickle. I don't have any faith in Rudolph in anything they've had behind him, Haskins or otherwise. There was no draft capital there. I do like Kellen Mond. I do think Davis Mills is intriguing. I do think they were gambles you could have taken in the mid-rounds. However, when you take a running back in the first round, you force your hand the rest of the draft, in my opinion. And as much as I like Najee Harris, that offensive line needs some serious help. I have serious concerns about that offensive line. They were 31st, according to Pro Football Focus breakdown or whatever. I mean, just atrocious. Ever since Mike Munchak left, it's been a downward struggle. And granted, they were slightly going downhill with Munchak, but I think Munchak gets a lot out of guys. I think he found ways to cover holes and made guys better than what they were. I mean, Villanova was supposedly a stud, and nobody wants him right now. So I'm nervous.
Didn't he sign with the Ravens?
Yeah, he just signed with the Ravens.
Ravens?
Yeah.
Yeah, which that surprised me too, because he did not have a good year last year. And I mean, you bring up the great point about Mike Munchak. He was kind of like the hidden gem of that coaching staff. He got some really good play out of guys, but I just think that with their cap situation, there wasn't a whole lot they could do, which was why it was so disappointed that they couldn't capitalize on it last year when they had a more full roster on the team.
So, Tom, you mentioned that you just didn't think they were in the position, and Rich, you mentioned that they were quarterbacks. Do you think they should have gone ahead and taken one of those quarterbacks in the second round? Because the first one wasn't taken until the end of the second in Kyle Trask. So there was an opportunity to draft a quarterback in round 2.
Yeah, I mean, I just am of the belief that it's not worth a mid-round quarterback selection. Historically speaking, the hit rate is very low. You might as well just take a shot on a guy in the first round if you're going to go all the way, and they weren't realistically going to be able to do that. And I think just given the situation they're in, it's kind of like an all or nothing year where they're going to try to give this one more shot, and if they suck, well, then we're going to have a top 10 pick next year probably. So I wasn't offended that they didn't pick a Q personally.
And how do you feel about Najee Harris in the first?
I was for that. I know Rich said that you didn't totally agree with it. I mean, I would feel better about going all O-line if we had even one competent running back on this team. We probably have the worst running backs in football. Like last year, I feel like they were begging, Benny Snell or James Conner or Anthony McFarland to seize the starting job, and none of them did it. They all made huge mistakes in crucial situations, and it was never formalized. So, even if we had a top 10 offensive line, I don't really trust any of those guys. So I'd rather have a guy who at least has the star potential, and hopefully we can piece together a decent O-line. But I know that there's a lot of people who disagree with that. That was just how I felt at the time.
You got to wonder why Le'Veon Bell was so successful at Pittsburgh, though, because, he's gone other places and done absolutely nothing with the exact same running style.
Much worse offensive line, going from what Pittsburgh had at that time to going to the Jets.
But I mean,
plus he took a year off.
Yeah, I know, but you just, Connor was decent for a while, then he just they just completely fell off. Is it all the line? I mean, who knows?
I think your running back play is that much. The type of running back, you have to have the vision, but it's absolutely the O-line play. Connor looked great on that same offensive line that Bell looked great under. Now, to Bell's point, though, Bell was really good in that scheme because of his patience and the way they set up the blocks. I don't think Bell would ever actually be... I think I lost a connection.
Did he freeze? He's frozen.
I don't
Welcome
think
back.
Bell... Yeah, sorry about that, guys. I don't think Bell would succeed as well in, say, like a Kyle Shanahan type of zone scheme, right? So I think Pittsburgh got that power run guy. There really wasn't a more power run guy out there in the draft. So I get that they got their guy. I just would have preferred, with as much O-line talent that was there, and I get the value that fell, I would have loved to have seen them load up on O-line talent. Taking a shot on someone like Kellen Mond. I think the Vikings potentially are going to look like geniuses with that pick, personally. He needs some time to develop, but there's a lot of raw tools there. Way more than Mason Rudolph ever had, in my opinion. And they took him in a
still
second
got at
round
least
to
2
develop.
years
To be
left
fair,
for Cousins. So.
Myles Garrett knocked most of Mason Rudolph's tools out.
That's true.
Rich, I'm with you on Mason Rudolph is terrible. I mean, he's not part of the present or the future as far as I'm concerned. But, I think in a perfect world with the way Pittsburgh built their team, Kendrick Green is a day one starter. He could probably play center or guard. I don't think that, Okorafor was terrible last year. Maybe with more time, he could be a decent tackle on one of those sides. And then, DeCastro is an all-pro if he's healthy. So there could be something there. I'm being a little optimistic, but
they lost Pouncey.
We lost. Well, Pouncey retired. But he was a shell of himself. One of the primary causes of that playoff loss. So on the bright side, if they can be even league average, they have a great amount of receivers. The kid from Penn State that they drafted, everybody is pretty high on him.
Dude, he's a stud, man. He's a stud.
Yeah. So, you're talking about an offense that's got a lot of playmaking talent, and I foresee them, kind of reverting to like what they did when Roethlisberger was a rookie, where he's doing a little more game managing and distributing rather than, going to the wild, wild west and gunslinging and calling his own plays all the time, because those days are clearly done.
So let's talk about the 2021 season. So we're all used to Pittsburgh being successful, basically since the dawn of the NFL, right? They've just, even if they're not competing with Super Bowls, they're always competitive. Tom, you mentioned, if they have a bad year, they'll just have a top 10 pick. But they still have, in all estimations, a top 5 defense. They've still got great weapons. And if Roethlisberger can at least be quick and accurate, I think he had the fastest release in the NFL last year. Granted, he didn't want to get hit. He was just throwing the ball within like a 1.5 seconds. But the point is, if he can get the ball to his playmakers, he does have a lot of weapons. If Najee Harris can be an upgrade, which is not saying much over the running backs they had, they could have like a middling like what 7-10 season. I always have to do the math in my head with 17 games now. It's not natural yet. But that doesn't get you a top 10 pick. So you're right back here again. Dwayne Haskins certainly isn't the answer. Will has shared many opinions about Dwayne Haskins on this podcast before.
Yeah, and I mean, you're certainly right. Mike Tomlin's never had a losing season, although he's going to have to get more than 8 to get above that record this time. On top of that, their schedule is not doing them any favors. They're playing a first-place schedule. Their crossover this year is the NFC North, which is, not a joke of a division. And they also have to play the Seahawks for their 17th game. So they're definitely going to have their work cut out for them. Having said that, their defense is still very strong, so it's hard for me to see them being, a total laughingstock unless they just got decimated with injuries. And, in the optimistic version of the Steelers, their offense is going to be clicking at least better than it was at the end of last year. So I think at best they could probably be 10-7, in the playoff hunt. We've never really seen them under Tomlin just completely bottom out, but, a losing record, it's totally on the table if, that offensive line is just in shambles like a lot of people expect.
But I still think that defense is good enough to keep them in games, barring a lot of injuries.
Yeah.
That's the thing and I think my problem with them not taking a quarterback, at least taking a shot on a quarterback, is the chances of you getting, first of all, a quarterback class next year, at least at this point, can always change. There's always risers, but it does not look good at all. There's nowhere near the depth of talent. But on top of that, even the quarterbacks that are there, you're just, in all likelihood, not going to be bad enough to get in that top 10. And I'm thinking maybe like 13 to 16 range. Do they trade up? That's not really been Pittsburgh's style before. So I just think you got Big Ben, who, by all accounts, should have retired last year. You got Dwayne Haskins behind him. We all shared how you feel about Rudolph. But they could be setting themselves up to be much worse off at this time next year, in my opinion.
Yeah, well, that's definitely a fair point. I just think that, every year there's talk about the quarterbacks in the draft, and, this is an organization that is quite risk-averse and conservative, and I think that they were just right or wrong in the mindset of we're just going to run this into the ground with Roethlisberger and revisit after that. I didn't get that sense from them, and we'll see if that proves to be a foolish choice one way or another this year.
Rich, what are your predictions for 2021 for Pittsburgh?
Well, there's something I thought about as we were sitting here discussing. One of the best things you can do to help your O-line is run the ball more. One of the hardest thing to do is pass block. Run blocking is a lot easier because you get to go after somebody, right? Well, if you want to hide Roethlisberger, so to speak, or you want to go back to kind of what you did his rookie year, which was play defense and pound the rock, their defense is going to keep him in most games. I think that absolutely 10-7, 11-6, absolutely is plausible. No matter who that schedule is, just with that defense. It's going to be dependent on if the O-line can run block. That's honestly what it's going to come down to. But to your point, Brian, they're going to be in a very similar situation next year. Whether they're mediocre and finish 8-9 or 7-10 or whatever it is, they're not going to have draft capital anyway to go after that quarterback, even if there is one or two. Okay, that's kind of why I said I would have liked to have seen someone like Mond that you could put behind Ben and see what happens. Right? I think they kind of needed to do that. But if you want to make sure you're going to run the ball like you want to, you were going to have to take a gamble on someone like Harris. And at the end of the first round, you're not going to get those guys at the end of the second round. They're not going to. Look, ETN went at the end of the first round. I don't agree with that pick, but it did. That's what happened. So I do think the Steelers are going to still be dangerous. That defense, they've done it. They've done it before where the offense has been lackluster at best, and that defense keeps them in games.
What's his name is a beast.
TJ Watt?
Safety.
Fitzpatrick.
Minka Fitzpatrick. Such a perfect fit. I mean, talk
Yeah.
about a trade. Right there, Brian, was a trade. When they made that trade, I turned to my wife and I said, the Steelers finally got their Palomalu back. This defense is going to get significantly better. And it did.
And they did.
I mean, he's a perfect fit for them.
Yep. He's a ball hawk. He definitely creates turnovers, keeps his eyes on the quarterback. doesn't always play perfect in coverage as far from a fundamental standpoint, but it doesn't matter when you can make plays like he does as far as getting turnovers.
Yeah, and one thing that didn't get talked about too much, and understandably so, but they retained Tyson Alualu and Joe Hayden as free agents, and those, believe it or not, were very key signings for them, because without Joe Hayden in that secondary, their corners were going to be pretty thin, and Alualu does a lot of the dirty work between, Tuitt and Hayward, so I think just across the board on D, there aren't too many better units, and they've been near the top 5 or leading the league in turnovers and sacks 2 straight years. So that'll certainly go a long way, no matter what's going on the other side of the ball.
How about a record prediction? Rich gave his. Tom, where do you think Pittsburgh's going to end up?
Yeah, well, I said optimistically, 10-7, so I'll kind of hedge and say 9-8. There's a few of those division games. They typically split with the Ravens every year. Now we're probably splitting with the Browns every year too. So 9-8 and kind of in that AFC fringe playoff conversation. But I just don't see them really bottoming out with this group, barring significant injury. But I'm definitely curious to see if this really is Ben's last year. I hope he goes out in somewhat good fashion. I don't think it's going to be a blaze of glory by any means, but maybe a blaze of light flame. We'll see. Occasional spurts.
Just a tiny spark here and there.
Yeah.
I actually agree with both you guys as far as the record, and I think that's the problem. Is that I'm more fascinated with what we're going to be talking about with the Steelers this time next year, when Ben clearly won't be coming back again. They'll have a middling draft pick. They'll have no answers at quarterback, and there won't be any great quarterbacks yet again, even less quarterbacks this time next year. So maybe we'll have you guys on again this time next year and see exactly where it ends.
Well, how are we looking on contracts for some folks, though?
For the non-Roethlisberger crowd?
Well, I'm just saying at quarterback. I mean, okay.
Oh, you mean as far as free agents?
Right.
You can get whichever doesn't work out between Jameis and Taysom Hill. Right?
Well, I mean, okay, let's say Jameis, if he does well, assuming they bring him back, maybe he doesn't want to come back.
Maybe Jimmy G, if he's in San Francisco for the whole season.
Right.
Sure.
Maybe
Cam,
Josh Allen
Cam, I bet you Cam Newton's going to need a team at this.
Please no Cam.
No, I'm not into that idea.
But let's say Josh Allen gets nicked up and Trubisky looks formidable for a couple of games.
Trubisky could, I think he's just signed a 1-year deal. Maybe it's 2 years, but the point is, he's going there to rehabilitate his career. But do you really want Trubisky? I should hope not.
Well,
Tom is in Chicago.
I don't know if I could handle that as a Chicago resident with all the Trubisky hate I've been surrounded by. But I definitely see where you're coming from with that, Rich. Like that, they're going to be in that market next year, regardless of what happens to Roethlisberger, I think.
Maybe Fitzpatrick gets abridged again and he wants 1 more year somewhere.
You should hope. That is best case scenario for you. If Fitzmagic decides to take his talents to Pittsburgh.
And I know we don't have the trade assets, but if Aaron Rodgers wants to, pull an NBA and James Harden and be like, I'm only playing for the Steelers or I'm not showing up, I wouldn't complain about that either.
I'm sure you wouldn't, as would any team other than Green Bay, or even Green Bay. Anybody that Rodgers wants to play for. Let's go ahead and wrap it up. We are going to bring both Tom and Rich back for our flavor of the week, so make sure to stay tuned for that. As we mentioned at the top, please make sure to subscribe, tell all your friends, and leave us a 5-star review on iTunes with your feedback. We love hearing from our listeners. You can find us on Twitter at official PP Pod. We're on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. If you do want to join our Discord community and leave all the comments about how great or how poorly we did on the podcast, you can do that. The link is in the episode description. Thank you for listening, and make sure to stick around for the flavor of the week.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Pigskin Party Podcast. If you're enjoying the show, please feel free to rate, subscribe, and leave a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. We really appreciate that effort. We'll catch you in the next Pigskin Party.